Make sure I'm still transmitting. Okay, I'm still good. Clicked where I shouldn't have. Anyways, so talking about opening the fifth seal. So ever since Cain and Abel, you know that people have been dying for the Word of God and for what their belief in God, and this hasn't changed much since Genesis 4:10, when Abel was killed by Cain, and he said, "What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground." That's God speaking. Great men and women have been killed for the witness of the word of the Lord. Known as the Old Testament saints, Jesus mentions them in his rebuke of the Pharisees. And I'd read a couple of passages here. Matthew 23:29 through 39. It's a great explanation of who I believe these souls are that we're talking about here. It's a combination of souls, not only Old Testament saints, but also saints that are also dying during the tribulation. The only people that aren't here are any martyrs that died during the church age. Of course, they would be in heaven with us. So Matthew 23, we're going to read 29 through 39. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have partaken with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore you be witnesses unto yourselves, that you are children of them who killed the prophets. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers, ye serpents, ye generation of vipers. How can you escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall be scourged in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel until the blood of Zacchaeus, son of Barachas, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. It's kind of why I picked up on this. Notice the altar there. I think that's an interesting correlation to the altar we see in heaven here. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, that killest the prophets and stonest them that are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, you shall not see me henceforth, till you shall say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. So, these are the Old Testament prophets, or at least Jesus talking about the Old Testament prophets. And so let's take a look at this scene. We have an altar. This, I believe, is the actual altar Jesus' blood was sprinkled on after his crucifixion. Here's a passage that speaks to it. It's in Hebrews 9:23 through 28. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So by reflecting on that, we can see that, and I can also almost see it too in something he said to Mary after his resurrection, where he indicated that he had to go to heaven for a brief time and come back down. I assumed that he was only up there a very short time, because it was only a few hours later that he was also talking to some other disciples. But in John 20:11 through 17 is a strange encounter. I just realized those verses didn't come up there. Let me just go through these Hebrews verses again so others can see them online. There's 26. Okay, John 20:11. But Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, because this is resurrection morning. And seeth two angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. And they said unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? She saith unto them, Because thou hast taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. And when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus. Always a fascinating study why that was, but a lot of speculations because his beard was torn out, what most people will say. And Jesus said unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? Whom seekest thou? She, supposing him to be the gardener, saith unto him, Sir, if they have bore him hence, tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. And Jesus said unto her, Mary. And she turned herself and saith unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. She recognized his voice. And Jesus said unto her, Touch me not. This is the verse I was getting to. I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren, and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and to your God. And the way he says that, to my God and to your God, gives me a kind of a hint that he is still in the mode of paying for our sins, and that when he takes his blood and puts them on the altar itself, that's when the actual atonement happens. Just a little bit of a speculation, but I think there's enough verses that kind of support it. Kind of wanted to bring that into this study. So we know that up through this point, that the Levites have been doing this every year since Moses got the order from up on Mount Sinai. And we see that in Leviticus 16, 17, and 9 through 19. I'll look at that real quick just to confirm what Jesus is doing here. There shall be no man in the tabernacle of the congregation when he goeth in to make an atonement in the holy place, until he come out and have made an atonement for himself and for his household and for all the congregation of Israel. And he shall go out unto the altar that is before the Lord and make an atonement for it. He shall take of the blood of the bullock and of the blood of the goat and put it upon the horns of the altar round about. And he shall sprinkle of the blood upon it with his finger 7 times and cleanse it, and hallow it from the uncleanliness of the children of Israel. So we got the basic outline here that, and I believe that's what Jesus did on this. And it's interesting that they put this in Revelation as the souls are under the altar, almost like that because of the blood of Christ, that the witness of these souls has been working hard to proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord. So I like that, kind of like that symbology of the altar there along with the souls. So like I mentioned before, these souls are not souls that were killed. These souls had to be killed either prior to the church age or during the tribulation. And since we're barely into the tribulation, and I believe that's why the Lord tells them that they got to rest a little bit longer. It's because there's going to be quite a few others that are going to join them during the tribulation age. I see that as kind of also as a positive, because it tells me too that that people will be saved during the tribulation. And for anyone that I know myself, I have acquaintances and family that don't know the Lord yet, and I keep praying and hoping that they'll change their mind, but it may take the rapture to really convince them. So it's something that I pray about all the time, that one more will be saved before that happens. So not only other times where souls are killed also in the tribulation, I included a couple of examples. So these are the other ones we're talking about. In Revelation 11:7, it talks about them here. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. That's Satan and the Antichrist going against the 2 witnesses. Then over in Revelation 20, verse 4, and I saw the thrones and them sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, which had not worshipped the beast, nor his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. And again, these are tribulation saints who are actually going to refuse the mark, most likely be beheaded or hunted down and killed in one way or another. And these will be additional souls that will be joining those ones we just mentioned. So that's why I got the idea this thing is an ongoing thing going right through the tribulation. It's not a one-time event. And even the example he gives there of waiting a little longer kind of also tells us that. And that's coming up in the next verse, in Revelation 6:10. And they cry out to the Lord, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And I kind of like how he responds. He doesn't respond in a kind of almost being impatient or maybe a little bit, in somewhat. He does it very lovingly. And white robes were given unto each one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season until their fellow servants also and their brethren that shall be killed as they were should be fulfilled. So they were given white robes, and white robes almost always typically talks about the salvation, our salvation through the blood of Christ, as putting righteousness on us like a robe. And a couple other places it shows that is over in Revelation 3, 4, and 5. Thou hast a few names even in Sardis, which have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. This is when Jesus was talking in a letter to the church of Sardis. He that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot out his name of the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. So we get the impression there that the white robe signifies that righteousness. And it's Jesus' righteousness, not our own, that he's clothing us in. Also Revelation 7:9. And after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues. Whenever you see that phrase, too, where it includes everybody, that's not just something Jewish. We're talking about here everybody, an entire planet. And palms are in their hands. This is another group of people that's talked about in heaven, and they were given white robes. I just wanted to point that part of it out. We'll get That's another group of people that I believe is the martyred saints that will actually be joining us in heaven at some point. And I haven't quite got to that point yet, but we'll be looking at that a little bit more later. I just wanted to point out the white robe part. And also in 7:14. And I said to them, Sir, thou knowest, and he said to me, These are they which came out of the great tribulation and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So because, like I said, this is towards the end, and we see here where it says that it came out of the great tribulation. So we haven't even gotten to that point yet. The great tribulation is actually the second half. So that's why this particular vision here hasn't happened yet. This is part of the ones that will be joining the group later on. Okay, now I move into the sixth seal. The sixth seal, I really wrestled with this passage as to its timing, but as I have been saying all during the seals, it seems to be something that is indicative all through the tribulation. And as we can see also in this seal, is more of an overview of conditions all through the tribulation. I have to say now I can see this chapter as being kind of a summary of the events happening all through the tribulation. And starting here, of course, as we head into the trumpets and the bowls, we will get more specific of the actual events that will proceed from the sealing of the 144,000, which is what we'll get into next week. So let's take a look at these verses and imagine that it as a general review of what's ahead and starts with the milder versions, but as it says in the last seal that we talked about last week, 1/4 of the earth is already dead. So it's definitely already happening. So it's like a beginning, but it's just going to get progressively worse and worse as you move through the tribulation. So verse 12 here, Revelation 6:12. I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. I'm going to try to break down a few of these, what I think it's talking about. And this is where I got kind of a little bit of the idea of a progression, particularly with the great earthquakes. There's actually 3 of them mentioned during Revelation. So it ain't a one-time event. And the last one is the worst one, and it's the one when Jesus is returning, which I believe is the one that actually splits the Mount of Olives. So we see 3 times, so we see it here, a great earthquake. And then we see in verse 11, Revelation 11:13, in the same hour there was a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were afraid and gave glory to the God of heaven. And then the third one is even worse, going to Revelation 16:18. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. We'll, of course, get into those a little bit more as we progress through the tribulation here. So to say this is the final one, and part of the reason I struggle with this is that there's a lot of different opinions about exactly how these play out. And in studying the 3 or 4 theologians I like to follow, they all basically kind of centered a little bit more towards this than I ever heard before. So that's why I'm leaning this way. Whereas I used to think it was all kind of like in chronological order, starting with the horse, and they're all lined up like in a big line. But now I can see that particularly because of the horses, that the seals are actually more of conditions all during the tribulation, and they'll be coming and going in different phases. Now, like when we talked about war, we know that I believe that the beginning one is actually the war of Ezekiel 38. But I think there'll be other wars that happen even during the tribulation. And that the biggest one is going to be the one at the end with Armageddon, where Jesus actually takes back the planet. And so you can get the same idea of wars that progress all the way through. I even mentioned that I believe Ezekiel 39 is actually at the end of the tribulation. So same idea is that these seals are kind of like reflecting on what's going on through the whole tribulation, progressively getting worse. So coming to the next one, Revelation 6:12. When I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. That's the next part. Black as sackcloth of hair. Okay, so trying to remember, John is up in heaven. He's seeing this vision, so he's describing the vision. Nobody's telling him what it is per se. He's just got to kind of write down what he sees. And the moon became as blood. Well, coming black as sackcloth. Well, we know that that sounds similar to a eclipse. When was it a solar eclipse where the moon blocks the sun and it becomes black as sackcloth, usually very limited in scope to a certain part of the world. And the moon becomes as blood. Well, blood moons are very common these days, so nothing super unusual about that, except that we see progressing through, when we go through the trumpets, we notice that trumpet number 4 has something very similar. And I'm just going to show you that one real quick. Revelation 8:12. And the 4th angel sounded, and the 3rd part of the sun was smitten, and the 3rd part of the moon, and the 3rd part of the stars. So as the 3rd part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a 3rd part of it, and the night likewise. So we kind of get a hint there of a progression of the, and of course when we get all the way to the end, when Jesus actually returns, it actually becomes black as coal for the whole planet, so that everyone can see Jesus coming. And he's like the light coming to the earth, and everything else is black. And we see that when we get into Revelation 19. Again, that same kind of regression. Then the stars of heaven fell unto the earth. And that's in Revelation 6:13. Even as figs tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. This one was fairly easy, as one of the first things we see is a meteor shower in the first trumpet of 8:7. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, And they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. Well, I don't know if you've ever witnessed a meteor shower, or a really good one. Let me show you one. Sorry, it's one of the parts of doing this on the fly is I have to change settings. Okay, that's what a meteor shower looks like, a really good one, and what you would see. And I got a couple of pictures. Here's another one. So that sure looks like stars falling from heaven, doesn't it? And now, of course, this comes to the end when you get to the end of the chapter 19, when Jesus is returning. They basically all fall from heaven. You can't see any of them, and you can't see any stars. Again, getting that black as coal kind of look, so that when Jesus appears in the heavens, there'll be no mistaking who he is. So I thought that was, so again, going back to this progression. So I'm feeling a lot more comfortable about this particular verse now than I was even 2 weeks ago. Because I kind of had been taught that the seals are all progressing in order also, in time. And I was kind of a little bit led astray, I think, in that direction as I studied it more and more. It's a fun part of prophecy, as I truly believe in what it says in Daniel 12, when it says that as we get closer and closer to the end times, things are going to make more sense. And I truly, truly believe that those people who are actually in the tribulation are going to read Revelation, and it's going to be like, they're going to know exactly what's going on if they understand, or if they're Christians at that point. So it may be indicative of the fact that we're getting that close. Now this next one is probably the hardest of the what's mentioned in this section. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it rolled up together, and every mountain and island were moved out of place. Again, starting with a progression. Now this one is strange, and I've heard lots of theories on this one. I've kind of got my own. There's actually Chuck Missler did a study where he mentioned that there's a theory that there's a veil that blocks us from heaven. The reason we can't see heaven is because of this veil, and it's because we can't see certain dimensions. There's actually 11 dimensions, but only 4 of them that you can see and measure. The rest of them are all theories based on mathematics. The other 7, and when they talk about those particular dimensions, they call them rolled up into less than a certain number of millimeters. And that's why you can't see them, because they're so small. And so this idea of being rolled up. As I was studying this more this week, there were some other verses that talk about this, and it helped me a little bit to try to understand what they're talking about. Departing as a scroll when it's rolled together. Isaiah 34:4. And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll. And all their hosts shall fall down as the leaf falleth off the vine, and as a falling fig from the fig tree. Well, there we see that same terminology, and we see that it kind of stands for all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll. And again, the falling down, kind of like the meteor shower kind of an idea. Another one over in 2 Peter. One more verse on Isaiah. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. So it almost sounds like he's going to do this prior to judgment, this idea of rolling up the scroll. So I'm getting a better idea of what I believe that this particular event is. 2 Peter 3:10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. You probably all heard this verse 1,000 times. In which the heavens shall pass away with great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat, and the earth also and the works therein shall be burned up. Well, some of these same things we're going to be looking at here when we get into the trumpets. We're going to burn up the trees and such. Elements shall melt. That's another thing that's going on later on in the bowls, I believe it is. But the day of the Lord will come. And so this could be basically God's last warning that, okay, time's up. And at this particular event right here in the sixth seal is basically God saying, that's it. Heaven is cut off from all mankind because now judgment is coming. And that's kind of the impression I'm getting with this particular, the scroll is rolled up. He's basically stopping right now we have full access to heaven, obviously through our prayers, but at this point, when God decides that he's going to now bring upon judgment, he's basically shutting off the earth. That's kind of the idea I'm getting out of this particular passage. Some other verses on it over in Psalms 102:26. They shall perish, but they shall endure, yet all of them shall wax old like a garment. As a vesture shall they change them, and they shall be changed. This is copied by Paul, this particular psalm in Hebrews 1:11 through 13. They shall perish, but they remaineth, and they shall wax old as it doth a garment. As a vesture shalt thou fold them up, and they shall be changed, but they are the same, and the years shall not fail. According to that part, the vesture being folded up. Scroll being rolled up, similar. But to which of the angels saith he at the time, sit on my right hand until I make thy enemies thy footstools? So that this particular, again, kind of pointing to the idea that judgment is coming. God has finally said that I've given you guys enough time. Now I'm turning it over to you, to Satan, basically. So basically saying it may happen at the midpoint. God has basically removed access to heaven and given Satan completely over to do as he will. Now I believe this particular rolling up the heavens probably happens right at the midpoint. And that's when Satan is thrown to heaven, and he is finally not allowed in heaven anymore. So I get the impression that that's when God basically shuts off heaven for good when it comes to the tribulation period. And from then on, it's just going to be really bad. And that's again, going into the Great Tribulation. So we also have some verses that talk about this event prior to the day of the Lord. This might be more of a fulfilling of prophecy to announce to the world the day has come, the beginning of the tribulation. Over in Joel 2:30 and 31. And I will show wonders in heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. It's also reflected in Acts 2:20. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and notable day of the Lord. So again, signs in the heavens. So we've heard verses on that before. And this may be the signs in the heavens referenced in this particular seal, that another sign to those that are searching for the Lord, just more confirmation that what their friends may have told them before the rapture and what they heard from some other source was true, and to help try to save as many as possible again during the tribulation. I don't think God ever really truly gives up until that last moment when Jesus actually steps foot back on the planet. So to finish up this portion, let's head into Revelation 6:15 through 17. And the kings of the earth and the great men and the rich men and the chief captains and the mighty men and every bondman and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand it? And so, again, talking about this, a verse that kind of speaks to this is over in Nahum 1, 5 through 7. The mountains quake at him, and the hills melt, and the earth is burned at his presence, yea, the world and all that dwell therein. Who can stand before his indignation, and who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? His fury is poured out like rain, and the rocks are thrown down by him. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knoweth them that trust in him. So Jesus also hinted at this also in Luke 23:30. Then they shall begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and the hills cover us. Also over in Isaiah 2, 19 through 21. And they shall go into the holes of the rocks, into the caves of the earth, in fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake terribly the earth. Going back a little bit to the earthquake idea. I think these earthquakes are going to be nothing like we've ever seen before. Even the mild ones in the beginning are going to be, because there's actually been mountains formed by volcanoes, and they've also been torn down by earthquakes. So it's not unusual to move a mountain by an earthquake. So that part is not, but I think it's going to be happening so much that it's going to seem like that the whole world is just coming apart. Finishing up Isaiah here. In that day a man shall cast his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which they made each one for himself to worship, to the moles and to the bats. To go into the clefts of the rocks and into the tops of the ragged rocks, for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake terribly the earth. So those who probably rejected the ID poised to them are now realizing their mistake, and that these, unfortunately, are those who are now saved, but now have to somehow endure the wrath of God. I would not want to be in their shoes. And like I said before, most of them may try to hide from the Antichrist, but he's not only got to hide from the Antichrist, but they also got to hide from God, because God is not going to spare them now just because they accepted him, unfortunately. That they're going to have to go through the same wrath that the rest of the world is going to go through. I don't know what I would do if I was in this position. I'd say probably just give myself up and take the beheading and get it over with. But be interesting to see what people decide to do. So as far as the seals are concerned, there will be an intense amplification of bad conditions, often experienced through history. God will give mankind over to his fallen nature and more. This is not the case with some of the trumpet and bowl judgments of later chapters. They'll be much more unique and limited in time. There will actually be direct judgments rather than the state of the world at that time. So the sixth seal concludes. I had this little passage here that David Goots is someone I like to follow. And this last passage on that last page, we're already getting close here, is something he added to this, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'll read through it, but you can go ahead and study those verses on your own. Who is able to stand? Only the believer can stand before the great judgment, and one who is justified by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. So the believer can stand in the face of this great wrath of God because Jesus already bore the wrath that the believer deserved. So some say we are escapists, but if he didn't come and get us prior, he would be breaking his own promise, actually. The Lord himself, Revelation 3:10, and I will read that one, made a promise. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world, to try them that dwell upon the earth. And it's echoed by Paul over in 1 Thessalonians 1:10. And to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, even Jesus, which delivered us from the wrath to come. And also 1 Thessalonians 5:9. For God hath not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ. So the time is now to become a believer in the Lord, and not to wait for for this particular period of time. I've actually had people tell me, I'll just wait and you guys get raptured, then I'll get saved. I said, well, you're going to go through hell, literally. And so we'll stop there, and I will end with a prayer. Oh, dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for these promises you have made to us. And help us, Lord, to use this information to be able to help others to see that time is the now for salvation, that we shouldn't delay it, we shouldn't put it off, and that we don't know when you're returning. And I think you did that on purpose so that we would be ever mindful of doing things now rather than procrastinating and doing things later. And so we give you all the praise and thanks. We look forward to the rest of the day and the great messages you have for us, and that you give us all the love and care that we need each and every day. We praise you and thank you. In Jesus' precious name I pray. And all the people say, Amen. Again, I'm sorry I didn't leave enough time for some questions if you had any. You can always come see me later.